Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really close look at Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals, and we're doing it through a unique lens, using insights from an AI-assisted research tool we're calling Arrowhead. On point. Our mission is simple. Cut through the noise, find those key nuggets of information, especially the surprising facts that matter if you're tracking Arrowhead's developments. So, think of this session as a conversation. We're basically asking OnPoint the big questions. I'll pose the timely ones, and my colleague here will relay the distilled answers OnPoint has surfaced. And just a quick reminder, OnPoint is independently developed. It's not affiliated with Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals itself.
That's right. And the material OnPoint processed, it gives us a really detailed picture. We're talking near-term catalysts, market potential, their financial footing, strategic vision. It's all laid out quite clearly.
Okay, let's jump right in then. For investors, probably the most immediate thing is Plozasiran for FCS, familial chylomicronemia syndrome. What's the exact PDUA/UFA date for FCS in the U.S.? And is OnPoint showing anything about an advisory committee meeting?
Okay, diving straight into the regulatory side from OnPoint. The PDUFA action date is November 18th, 2025. And this is interesting for investors. The FDA isn't currently planning an AdCom meeting for Plozasiran.
No AdCom. That often suggests a smoother ride, yeah.
Often, yes. Though, nothing's ever set in stone with regulatory matters, but it's generally seen as a positive sign.
Got it. So, beyond the U.S., what's the status in Europe? With the EMA and anywhere else globally for FCS?
Yeah, OnPoint shows they submitted an MAA, that's the Marketing Authorization Application, to the EMA. It was accepted for review back on March 20th, 2025. And what's really key here is it's being fast-tracked. That's because of the significant unmet need in FCS. They're also looking beyond Europe. Arrowhead intends to file in Canada and Japan in the coming months. So a definite global push.
Okay, global strategy is clear. Let's pivot to the clinical side. The Phase 3 Palisade study. What were the key efficacy results? Specifically, triglycerides and, crucially, those acute pancreatitis events.
Right, Palisade. What's fascinating here is just how effective it was. Plozasiran hit its primary endpoint, a statistically significant reduction in triglycerides. We're talking about an 80% drop from baseline at month 10.
80%, wow.
Yeah, it's substantial. And to put that in context, OnPoint highlights that over 90% of subjects got their triglycerides below 500 milligrams per deciliter. That's that critical risk threshold for acute pancreatitis. Digging a bit deeper, at the 25 milligram dose, 83% got below 1,000, 75% below 880, and fully half got below 500.
Half below 500, that's potentially life-changing for those patients.
Exactly. And it didn't stop there. It also met all the key secondary endpoints, including, importantly, a statistically significant reduction in acute pancreatitis events. That's huge for everyone, doctors, patients, payers.
That pancreatitis piece really does stand out. What did OnPoint uncover about the safety profile in Palisade? Anything notable compared to placebo?
Well, OnPoint's analysis suggests a generally favorable safety and tolerability profile. It looked pretty comparable to placebo, actually. Discontinuation rates were low. The adverse events noted were things like, COVID-19, upper respiratory infections, headache, type 2 diabetes, abdominal pain. Nothing really jumped out as a major warning signal. Pretty standard stuff, it seemed.
Okay, good to know. So how does Plozasiran for FCS really stack up against other options, existing or emerging? Efficacy, safety, dosing.
How does it differentiate itself?
This is where OnPoint really emphasizes its potential. It's described as a first-in-class RNAi therapeutic, possibly best-in-class for FCS. And just briefly, RNAi works by silencing specific genes. Here, it targets the gene for APOC3, which helps regulate triglycerides. By doing that, you get these deep, durable reductions up to 94% in APOC3, leading to that 80% triglyceride drop we mentioned. That's apparently 3 to 4 times more effective than something like Vascepa, the fish oil derivative.
3 to 4 times. Quite a difference. And then there's convenience. It's a quarterly subcutaneous shot, much less frequent than, say, Ionis's olezarsen, which is monthly. And maybe most critically, that phase 3 trial showed statistically significant pancreatitis reduction, specifically pancreatitis, not just general abdominal pain like some others might report. That's a key differentiator.
Right, that specificity matters.
Sure.
Okay, let's shift from the clinic to the market. If it gets approved, what's Arrowhead's commercialization plan for Plozasiran and FCS in the U.S.? How are they gearing up?
OnPoint lays out a pretty focused strategy. They're planning an independent commercial launch, aiming for Q4 2025, assuming FDA approval. They want an efficient day one launch. So they're building the team. Marketing, ops, market access leads are in place. They've hired a national sales director who's going to recruit the field force. Their medical affairs team, the MSLs, are already out there. And they're setting up the crucial specialty pharmacy and patient hub systems needed for a rare disease drug. Plus, they've launched patient resources, like a campaign called We'll Get There Soon, and an early access program. Market education seems to be a big focus, finding those potential FCS patients.
Makes sense for an ultra-rare disease. Which brings up the market size question. How many FCS patients are we talking about, according to Arrowhead's assessment? And what are their expectations for uptake?
Yeah, OnPoint confirms FCS is ultra-rare. The estimate is less than 1,000 individuals in the U.S. with the genetic confirmation. These folks often have incredibly high triglycerides, high risk of recurrent pancreatitis. For that first year post-launch, Arrowhead is estimating maybe 20–40% of diagnosed eligible patients could get treated. They seem quite optimistic, basically because Plozasiran looks like such a big step up. The value proposition is quite clear, and it offers substantial differentiation.
Okay, small initial population, but high need. Given it's an orphan drug, how are they tackling potential hurdles with market access and reimbursement?
Good question. The orphan drug designation definitely helps. On Point Notes, their market access team is already talking to payers. They're highlighting the clinical data, sure, but also the economic evidence, especially that significant drop in pancreatitis events. That's something payers really care about, avoiding hospitalizations. They're even running that dedicated pancreatitis outcomes study, SHASTA-5, specifically to give payers more data. Pricing details for FCS aren't explicitly stated, but OnPoint suggests the company expects it to be in the same ballpark as Ionis's olezarsen. So that gives us a hint. And interestingly, their strategy looks beyond FCS. They plan to leverage the FCS sales setup to move into larger populations like severe hypertriglyceridemia, SHTG later on, smart planning.
That's a crucial link. Let's talk about that broader potential then, SHTG. What's the latest on the phase 3 SHASTA studies for Plozasiran and SHTG? Timelines for enrollment, data.
Right, the SHTG program. OnPoint shows Arrowhead is moving forward with 3 phase 3 studies. SHASTA-3, SHASTA-4, and SHASTA-5. SHASTA-3 and NAFTA-4 are the big global placebo-controlled trials. They're looking at the 25 milligram dose in SHTG patients, those with fasting triglycerides over 500 milli-GDL. About 700 patients total, treated for a year. Enrollment for these, plus another study called MUIR3, seems on track to finish by summer 2025. That sets them up for study completion in 2026 and filing an SNDA probably late 2026 or early 2027. SHASTA-5 is that separate outcome study we mentioned, focused just on pancreatitis reduction in the highest risk SHTG patients. Those with TGs over 880 and a history of pancreatitis, that's primarily for payers, and they plan to start it this year, 2025.
Okay, so progress there. What did the earlier phase 2 data like SHASTA-2 show for SHTG? How much triglyceride reduction? Was it durable?
The phase 2 data was really impressive, according to OnPoint. SHASTA-2 showed profound and durable reductions. We're talking maximum drops of up to 87% in triglycerides, 90% in ApoC3. Even out at 24 weeks, TGs were still down 74% from baseline. And again, over 90% of patients got below that 500 milli-GDL threshold. Half actually got below 150 milli-GDL at 24 weeks, basically normal levels for many. And these effects held up. They were sustained over 12 months in Palisade and seemed to continue in the open label extensions, plus positive effects on other lipids too. Very consistent, very strong signal.
Very strong indeed. Are they looking at Plozasiran for anything else beyond FCS and SHTG? Yeah. Any other future potential indications OnPoint mentioned?
Yes, definitely. On Point Notes, they're exploring it for mixed hyperlipidemia. That's the MUIR study, a phase 2b. And bigger picture, they're planning a large phase 3 cardiovascular outcomes trial, a CVOT. Could be with Plozasiran or maybe Zodasiran, another drug in their pipeline. That would target the huge ASCVD population, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. That's a massive undertaking, though. Huge capital commitment. OnPoint also mentions a Capitan study as part of the SUMTANT program, also related to mixed hyperlipidemia, so definitely broadening the scope.
Okay, so let's talk scale. What's Arrowhead's estimate for the SHTG market size? How does that really compare to FCS?
The comparison is, well, stark. OnPoint says Arrowhead pegs the SHTG market at 3 to 4 million people in the U.S. alone. That's using the definition of fasting TGs over 500 milli-GDL. And within that group, about 1 million have TGs over 880 milli-GDL. Now compare that to FCS. Less than 1,000 genetically confirmed patients in the U.S.
Right. It's a completely different scale.
Exactly. Arrowhead clearly sees SHTG as a major commercial opportunity. On Point suggests they think Plozasiran could potentially be a $2-3 billion per year drug just in the SHTG market. That's where the real blockbuster potential lies.
A multi-billion-dollar potential. So
Yeah.
what about competition in SHGG? How does Arrowhead see the landscape? How does Plozasiran stack up?
Well, On Point indicates Arrowhead feels the current treatment options for SHTG are pretty limited, not really adequate. They position Plozasiran as having a best-in-class profile with real differentiation. The data suggests, and On Point quotes this, no other near-term therapy can match Plozasiran's activity in dropping triglycerides so dramatically. They're aiming for like a 50-60% reduction, whereas current treatments might offer only about 20%. Plus, you still have the convenient quarterly dosing versus monthly for some competitors, and the safety profile looks good. They acknowledge Ionis's olezarsen is a competitor, sure, but they actually think having two companies educating doctors and payers about this level of triglyceride lowering will actually help grow the market faster. And they make a point of distinguishing their SHASTA-5 outcome study by only counting confirmed pancreatitis events, suggesting maybe a higher bar than studies looking at broader abdominal pain.
Interesting angle on competition potentially expanding the market. All right, let's switch gears to the financials. That recent deal with Sarepta Therapeutics. How big of an impact did that have on Arrowhead's cash runway and their ability to fund the Plozasiran launch and everything else?
Oh, it's huge. On Point calls the Sarepta deal, which closed February 10th, 2025, transformational for their balance sheet. It apparently sets a potential long-term path to profitability. It massively strengthened their finances, extending their cash runway out into 2028. The key takeaway here is, according to On Point, no current needs for further cash infusions from an equity raise or other sources. That's significant financial breathing room. Plus, it cuts their R&D spend because Sarepta takes over the muscle and CNS programs. That lets Arrowhead really double down on cardiometabolic, including Plozasiran. It really de-risks things quite a bit.
Okay, transformational is a strong word. Could you break down the specifics of the deal?
Yeah.
Upfront cash, milestones, royalties.
Sure. On Point gives a clear picture. Arrowhead got $500 million cash up front. Another $325 million came from Sarepta buying Arrowhead stock at a 35% premium. Plus, they'll get $250 million more, paid in $50 million chunks annually over 5 years. There's also potential for another $300 million relatively soon, tied to enrollment in a phase 1/2A study for ARO-DM1. And then looking longer term, there are substantial development milestones up to $410 million per program, sales milestones up to $700 million per program, and royalties tiered up to low double digits on sales. On Point calculates the total potential value could exceed $11 billion. It's a massive long-term partnership.
11 billion potential. Now,
Yeah.
what does that leave them right now in terms of cash? And what's the official projected runway?
Okay, so as of March 31st, 2024, On Point reported they had about $128 million in cash and equivalents, plus around $395 million in securities. But if you factor in the Sarepta deal, the upfront cash and the equity investment, their pro forma cash position jumps to roughly $1.5 billion as of September 30, 2024. So as we said, they're funded into 2028. They project being able to fund operations potentially through multiple launches, both their own and partners. A very solid position.
Definitely solid. So how do they actually plan to get to profitability? What are the main revenue streams they're counting on after Plozasiran hopefully gets approved?
Well, On Point confirms the big goal is becoming a commercial stage company, and Plozasiran is absolutely central to that. It's planned as their first independent launch in 2025. So, key driver number 1, Plozasiran sales. First for FCS, leveraging that best-in-class profile, then expanding into SHTG, where the big money is, and potentially ASCVD down the line. It's a pipeline within a drug, as they say. Beyond that, significant revenue should come from milestones and royalties from all their partners, Sarepta, obviously, but also Amgen for olpasiran, Takeda for fazirsiran, GSK for ARO-HSD and that relicensed J&J drug, and even Vizerna in China. New business development deals are also part of the plan, along with hitting that ambitious 20 and 25 pipeline goal. It's a multi-pronged approach to revenue generation.
You really see how pivotal Plozasiran is. If it succeeds commercially for FCS, how does that validate their whole TRiM platform technology? What does that mean for the rest of their pipeline?
This is a really important point On Point emphasizes. Plozasiran, if approved, would be the very first drug approved from Arrowhead's pipeline built on their TRiM platform. That's huge validation. It proves the platform can go from discovery all the way to a commercial product. And given its potential best-in-class profile, it shows the platform can create highly effective, differentiated drugs. Success fundamentally de-risks the entire TRiM platform. It builds confidence for all the other programs, especially the other liver-targeted drugs like zodasiran. It enables that pipeline acceleration. They talk about 2 to 3 new clinical programs a year, the 20 and 25 target. It supports moving into new tissues, lung, muscle, CNS, tumors, fat. And it strengthens their hand financially and in future partnerships. It proves the platform can generate more non-dilutive cash through deals. It really is a linchpin for everything.
A true linchpin. But of course, there are always risks. What does OnPoint identify as the main hurdles or risks for the Plozasiran launch and their broader plans? And what are they doing to mitigate them?
Right, you always have to consider the risks. OnPoint lays out several key ones Arrowhead faces. First, commercialization challenges. They haven't launched a drug independently before. So, execution risk, market acceptance, competition are all factors. Second, regulatory and clinical uncertainties. Getting approval isn't guaranteed. Expanding indications can be tough. Different regulators might have different views. Clinical trials might fail, or safety issues could pop up, maybe impacting other programs. And big trials like CVOTs are incredibly expensive. Third, reimbursement and pricing. Getting payers on board is always a challenge, and new laws like the Inflation Reduction Act add complexity. Fourth, just the operational strain of growing from R&D focus to a commercial entity. Fifth, manufacturing, making enough drug consistently, whether in-house or via third parties. And finally, IP and partnerships. The patent landscape is complex, and partnerships, while lucrative, can sometimes end.
Okay, that's a fair list of challenges. What about mitigation? What strategies are they using?
OnPoint highlights several mitigation strategies. One is strategic focus and pipeline diversification. They focus on targets with strong biological rationale, and having a broad pipeline, that 20 and 25 idea, means they aren't reliant on just one drug succeeding. Another is financing and business development. They lean heavily on non-dilutive cash from partnerships like Sarepta, Amgen, Takeda, GSK, funding them into 2028, as we discussed. They partner strategically in areas outside their core focus. For Plozasiran specifically, there's a dedicated commercial build-out, hiring experienced people, building the infrastructure needed for a solo launch, and scaling up. And finally, they leverage their platform advantages and continuous improvement. The TRIM platform itself is designed for simpler manufacturing and potentially better safety. It allows for faster development. They're investing in their own manufacturing capabilities while still using partners, and always working to expand the platform to new cell types.
What an incredible deep dive. We've really covered a lot of ground, from the specifics of Plozasiran to the underlying platform, the financial strength, the risks. It's clear Arrowhead has a complex, but potentially very rewarding strategy unfolding. These insights from OnPoint really crystallize the key things for investors to watch.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here, stepping back, is how Plozasiran's potential success isn't just about that one drug for FCS or even SHTG. It's about the validation it could provide for the entire RNAi approach. And for a company making that bold move from R&D into independent commercialization, it really makes you think about where biotech is heading, doesn't it? And how getting these deep insights into specific innovations helps understand how value gets created.
It really does. A perfect thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this gave you, our listener, a much clearer, more informed view of Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time for another session of Knowledge Extraction.